So we've been thinking of Advent as a time of reflecting on time and upon ourselves as creatures of time, affected by the dimensions of past and future. But we can also think of time itself as the creation of the divine, as a vehicle to bring us to share fully in the divine nature. So we need time to move beyond time into the eternal now of God. And what helps us to live this paradox and to keep open to these different aspects and dimensions is, of course, a discipline, a contemplative practice that's built into ordinary life, ordinary time, but transforms it and allows us to make progress, to grow, to heal from the past, and to overcome our fears and uncertainties about the future. So there's the wisdom of prayer that Jesus puts before us as the essence of his contemplative vision. His teaching on prayer is a teaching on contemplation. That teaching is both a vision of what we are and how we can come to that fulfillment of our destiny, of our true nature, become who God calls us to be. But at the same time, it's a practical teaching on how we get through day by day and get through the problems of life. So I wanted to, as I ended this morning talking about how this understanding of sacred time helps us to identify and see the real value of the treasure buried in the field, one of the great parables of the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a treasure buried in a field. He buried it again, and for sheer joy went and sold everything he had and bought the field. So let's just take a moment to think about that parable, and then I'll give you another map as a way of understanding or describing the process that we go through in everything I've been saying, we've been talking about. So first of all, many of the parables of Jesus, and he taught in parables, he taught in very simple language to simple people, but each of these parables has an incredible capacity to open the mind of the listener or the reader to new levels, new depths, really, of wisdom. And I see this constantly, particularly, well, with all the parables, but with this parable about the treasure buried in the field. So let me just listen to it again. And the kingdom of heaven is like it's like a man who found a treasure. So think of all of the elements here adding up. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a treasure buried in a field. He buried it again, and for sheer joy went and sold everything he had and bought the field. So the first line here is, the kingdom of heaven is like. What are the elements of this parable? The first one. The kingdom of heaven is like someone who? Finding. What kind of finding do you think it was? Just what do you think it was like?
It was very precious. It was a very valuable finding.
Yeah, it was. But I just thinking, was he out? Was he driving? Was he walking? Was he? He was walking. Okay. And then, how did he find the treasure?
Stumbled over the corner.
He tripped over something. So, but it was buried in a field, wasn't it?
By somebody.
Was he looking for it? Doesn't say he was looking for it.
No, but if it was buried and he walked by the field, I'm not saying he knew that he was looking for it, but
You might have found a coin.
yeah.
Okay, so, all right. We're just helping Jesus get his point across, that's all. So, he's walking, we agree, and he finds a treasure buried in a field, and he finds it, why? Because there was a coin had maybe come up from the surface. Anything else? Any other? What?
Something that shines.
Something was shining, yes.
Maybe he was digging for water.
Yes, yes, okay. He may have been working in the field, that's true. Maybe he wasn't walking, maybe he was working in the field.
He wasn't in his thoughts, he was present. Because if you are not present, you don't see it.
Okay, so he wasn't.
He was connected with the reality.
He was paying attention to something, yeah.
First thing struck me: the kingdom of heaven wasn't a place; it was like a person.
Yes. Yeah, certainly. This is. I mean, what the big question is: what is the kingdom of heaven? It's like all these things.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because it says the kingdom of heaven is like a man.
Who?
But it sounds like it's the man,
Yes.
not that the very treasure is the kingdom of heaven.
But the man who has going through certain experiences, yes?
But the kingdom of heaven is referring
To the man.
The treasure.
Well, is it? Yes. Is it just the treasure? Well, let's come back to that. So, anyway, he finds the treasure. Either he's working and he sees a coin on the surface, or he's working and he's digging for water and he finds this box full of treasure or whatever it is. We don't know what kind of treasure it is, whether it's gold coins or something else. And then, what does he do? Why does he bury it again?
He's afraid to lose it.
He's afraid to lose it. Yes, what else?
Being selfish.
What, he's being selfish?
He's not ready already.
He's not ready already. All right? He wants to keep it to himself.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put all these selfish reasons out of the picture. So, he wants to keep it, doesn't want anyone to know about it.
He wants to preserve it.
He wants to preserve it, protect it, keep it to himself. Now, can we give him any more spiritual reasons for burying it?
He doesn't know what to do with it.
He doesn't know what to do with it.
He buys a field afterwards to be sure that it is his, because it must belong to somebody else, as it is not his field.
So he goes off, finds the owner, doesn't tell the owner about the treasure. That's what you were saying. Have you ever bought a property like that?
Didn't you tell us that when they were building some part of this, that they found a treasure?
Yes. Yeah, well.
He wanted to save it.
You wanted to save it?
To take care of it, to be sure it was saved that way.
So he was protecting it. Okay.
Too precious.
It was too precious to what?
Or
To lose.
To use, yeah, to use.
Or maybe he was
He wants
afraid.
to be very protective. That's okay.
Okay. All right, we'll come back. That's good. I mean, they're all valid, but
But maybe he was afraid that if he took it with him, someone would rob it from him.
okay, he was frightened. Somebody might steal it from him, yes. Okay, these are all very urban 21st century explanations.
But maybe the treasure is not coins.
Aha, well, that's an interesting point. We don't know what the treasure is.
Maybe it's just a seed.
But it is a treasure.
It is a treasure. So we're assuming that it's a material treasure, well, and a kind of a monetary treasure. Huh? No? No? So, say what?
It could be freedom or love, or it could be treasure from his heart.
Yeah, but how do you bury that again?
Not very. It's not material. Maybe we do bury it.
Okay.
It's just he wasn't able to use it.
All right. Lena?
Something like a vision. That's not the right word, but something with expansion.
Okay, he had an expansion of consciousness. All right, so anyway, he buries the treasure. And what is he feeling at this point?
Stealing?
Feeling.
No, feeling.
Elated.
What?
Elated.
Yes.
Sheer joy.
What?
Sheer joy.
Sheer joy. I mean, this is absolute joy. And feeling this absolute joy, what does he do?
He sold his possessions.
What does he sell? Everything. Everything. Anybody here ever left everything and followed Christ?
Not yet.
So what does selling everything? What he's detached from his possessions because he's selling it, but is he attached to the treasure
Yes.
and owning the field? Well, whatever, detachment and attachment, maybe we can come back to that. But so, is he? What is he? Do you get the feeling he's sitting down with his accountants and working out exactly how much the field is worth and how much the treasure might be worth and whether he gets a tax rebate and whether he gets... Is he calculating like that? So what does he do? He just phones his stockbroker and says, sell everything. And the stockbroker says, well, you can't do that. You'll lose a lot of money. No, he says, sell everything. Okay, well, yes, he's certainly impulsive, yeah.
Following his heart.
He's following his heart, yes. What does the field symbolize?
Yes. I would say it's the same as heaven.
The which?
The kingdom of heaven. The field is like the kingdom of heaven. So he puts himself, that's his life now.
Okay. Okay.
The field is oneself.
The field is oneself.
It could be the earth too, and he found the kingdom of heaven where while he was still alive on earth.
Well, he's definitely on earth because he's buying and selling and he's feeling joyful and so this is definitely a terrestrial experience, isn't it? I mean, it's not afterlife, this is now. And the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says, is very close to you. You are never far from the kingdom of heaven. So, within you and among you, yeah. So, he sells everything he has and he buys the field. What does buying the field symbolize?
Changing your life.
Changing your life. Yeah, because he's got nothing else in the world now except this damn field. With a treasure in it that he's buried.
He has exclusive rights to it.
Oh my God, this is like I was talking about this once in the Channel Islands, which is a tax haven off the coast of England. And so everybody has their secret bank accounts there. And so I said, why did he bury it in the field? So everybody said, well, because he didn't want the tax man to know about it. So, but owning, this is about possession. I mean, when we think of owning a field, owning a car, owning a sweater, it's something that is possession, and yet we're supposed to renounce all our possessions if we are to get into the kingdom. So,
Total surrender.
okay, so it sounds like possession, owning something, and what's the condition then for possessing something, identifying yourself totally with it, because he's just only has the field now, he's got nothing else in life except the field and the treasure in the field. But this, if it is to be the kingdom, would need to mean some kind of renunciation.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do to own something and yet be completely free from it?
There should be a kingdom of God. There is a treasure in that field.
Yeah.
He knows it. And
Yeah.
it is so costly that it is more than what all he owed before.
That's right.
So it's more important.
Yes, it's everything. That's all he's got now is this field. But what do you have to do in order what does he have to do, let's say then, to own the field? But the field is part of this kingdom of God experience. Therefore, it's about renunciation at the same time. So he's owning it, and everything is renunciation. What's that condition? How can you be at the same time owning something and be completely detached from it?
You have to give it away.
John, okay? John?
To be equanimous.
What?
To be equanimous.
Equanimous? What does that mean?
That's the word.
Equanimity?
Thank you.
Oh, I've never heard that. Equanimous. Okay, you have to have a calm, steady mind, is what you mean? Okay, well then the question, how do you get to that calm, steady mind?
Be truly yourself.
Be truly yourself, yes.
Be true.
Yes, but how do you get to that be truly yourself?
But how can you describe it? Because you don't, in a way you don't know it and you know it when you're there. So how can it be described? I don't think it can.
Can't be described. Well, that's true. That's why you need a parable. Why we need to interpret the parable. You get closer to an understanding of it. But there's a logic in this. It's not a fairy tale. There's a deep transformative logic to these parables. That's why they work on us. They're true. And so let's come back to the same question. Imagine yourself. What would you like to own? Or what would you like to have? And I don't just mean material things. But what would you like to have so much that you would be prepared to sacrifice everything for it, but at the same time, this would be an authentic experience and that fills you with joy, and in which having it does not diminish the joy that you feel. In fact, it would expand the joy that you feel. And therefore, you would be detached from it. You would be free from it. What do you need to do to get that combination, to get that right? To have what you want and not to be trapped by attachments and... Well, the ego, okay, so the ego has to go.
True love for others.
True love for others. What? To be free, but how do you get to that?
By the grace of God.
By the grace of God and the help of my friends. What is it?
Well, I think the Holy Spirit, it's a work on us.
Yes.
Practice.
Sure. Yes. I mean, that's all true. I'm just trying to be awkward here, just trying to get to the point I want to make. But no, these are all true. I'm not saying.
Almost there.
All right. Let's have a look at the map and then see what if there's any relationship between this map of the stages of meditation, stages of consciousness we pass through as we meditate, and this parable of the kingdom. I mean, we meditate in Christian faith because of the kingdom, surely. Okay, so Anna, can you remember the exact moment you first meditated in this way? Okay. Can you remember the first time you meditated in this way? Can you remember the first time you meditated this way? Can you remember Lachlan, can you remember? Can you remember, Sebastian? Giovanni, can you remember? Can you remember? Okay. Can you remember? No? Can you remember? 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 Henriette?
Yeah, oh, sorry.
John, can you remember?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Can you, yes?
Yes.
Shirley, can you remember?
Yes.
Can you remember? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes? Yeah?
Not today, but the situation, yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Not the exact, yes?
No.
No. Okay. So, well, I can as well. So, and maybe it's the idea of remembering is not right for everyone. Okay, so let's say you remember, well, it doesn't matter whether you remember or not. Anyway, there was a day when you actually began this practice. I mean, you may have had, of course, everyone's got a spiritual journey before you start to meditate. Or maybe you meditated in other ways, or maybe you had other kinds of experience. So, but let's say there was a moment where you, and maybe not everybody does, but where you say, I will meditate in this way. I don't know where it's going to take me. Maybe I'm going to give up after a week. Maybe this isn't for me. But I'm going to start. I'm going to try. So you sit down and you say, oh, this is what they tell me to do. It sounds a bit strange, but okay. I sit down, I sit still, I sit with my back straight, I close my eyes, and I start to say this word. And 2 seconds later, My mind is all over the place. So it sounds simple, but it's not so simple, is it? And I'm really bad at meditation because my mind is jumping around from thought to thought. So you give up. Most people give up. But then maybe a week later, or a month later, or 20 years later, you think, maybe I should come back to it, try it again. There was something in it. I think there may be something in it. I'm not sure what it is. I felt a little bit of peace, I'll come back to it. So, when the first time I meditated, I was my first year at university. I'd gone to see Father John. I wasn't expecting to learn meditation because he was listening to my problems. And then he introduced me to meditation in a very few words with a very light touch. And I knew at that moment, first of all, I didn't understand what he was talking about. It didn't make sense. I was intellectually very confused. But my heart was opened, and I trusted what he said 100%. And I really felt an awakening of a desire for where this could take me. That there was a knowledge and a way I could follow. So I trusted it, and I meditated on my own, first time. Total disaster, of course. And it was quite a few years later before I got into a regular pattern of meditation. It's easy to forget how long it can take. So, but I always knew it, and he never put any pressure on me and never told me I ought to meditate. It was something I just kept on coming back to, and eventually, because I was a very bad meditator and because I'm a very undisciplined person and I'm a slow learner, I needed to become a monk to meditate. So, everyone's journey is different. But in a way, we could all meet in this discovery, finding what turns out to be a treasure. Doesn't seem like a treasure at first, but you think it might be worth something. So anyway, maybe after you give up, but with a little help from your friends and your meditation group, or whatever other ways you find to help you, or grace comes back and gives you another chance, and then a third chance, and eventually you persevere enough to come to another level of consciousness. Remember, this level of consciousness, your mind is just teeming with distractions, the things I got to do this afternoon, the things I didn't do yesterday, and my problems, and did I pay too much for that thing that I bought? Did I, how am I going to arrange my calendar? So all of these day-to-day problems plus our familiar anxieties and obsessive thoughts and fantasies. So we meet all of this here at the very first time we start to sit down and start to say the mantra. We just discover how much chaos really there is, and we may just run away because we don't like it, and we prefer to feel calm. We prefer to put on some nice music and have a nice scented candle and get in a bath and play some plain chant. That's very relaxing. Now I feel that's nice. I like to meditate that way. Fine, I'm not making fun of it. I am, but I'm not really. So, but there's something authentic about this encounter with our own distraction and confusion and chaos. And what is attractive is the fact that we seem to have found a little path that could take us deeper. All we have to learn is to keep saying the mantra. If we want to follow this way, and if you don't, go another way. But this is the map I'm drawing. So, let's say you come to another level of consciousness. So this is the surface level of our daily mind, jumping from one thought to another. This is where we feel stress. This is where we feel overwhelmed. This is where we feel, there isn't enough time to do everything. This is where we lose a sense of perspective and things become blurred. We lose focus. And but we learn, with a little help, to return to the mantra, to keep returning to it. That meditation is not about blanking out the mind. If you want to blank out the mind, you get a nice bottle of Beaujolais. That's easier. But it's not about blanking out the mind. It's about faithfully returning to the mantra every time you get distracted. And so, very quickly you learn that meditation is simple. But simple is not easy. Simple requires fidelity. But it is simple, so any fool can do it. That's why children can do it so easily. And as Giovanni realized, the people in L'Arche can do it. There was a story, who told us that story? Oh, it was one of the L'Arche assistants told me that he'd been playing Father John's tapes, one of Father John's talks. And he left it in the CD player, or whatever it was. And one of the handicapped people found this machine, and they were playing the talk over and over and over and over again, like incessantly. And eventually, this assistant snapped, and he took it away and turned off the tape, and he said, why are you playing this damn thing? He said all the time, you can't keep playing this all the time. And then he said he hated himself when he heard himself saying it. But he said, so what can you hear in it anyway? And the fellow looked at him and said, love. So, with some help, and with patience, and with time, and with fidelity, you learn the art of saying the mantra. And you realize it's not a technique that you are in control of, it's a discipline that you are following. And discipline, anyone who practices a discipline becomes a disciple. You don't yet know what you are a disciple of, but by following the discipline, your ego is, of course, reduced. And as your ego is reduced, you find that you are learning, and that is what makes you a disciple. And it's quite rare today to meet disciples, anyone who is really a disciple. We're all, maybe it was always in Jesus, but because we're always looking for techniques. We're looking for success. We're looking for a treasure that we can put in the bank. So, but little by little, we learn to simplify and to learn from our experience. And we stay with it. And then it brings us to this other level of consciousness. And this is the level of consciousness you could call the hard disk of your consciousness, of your memory. So everything in every cell of your body is stored here that has ever happened to you or that you have fantasized happened to you. And And a lot of this information, a lot of this data that we've pushed under the surface of consciousness is not finished. As we were saying yesterday about the past lives in us. And often in the organs of our body or in the patterns of our psyche and our habitual reactions to people or to things and our addictions and so on. The past lives in us. But in many of these ways in which it lives in us, we are held captive by it. So great, huge amounts of energy, of space, are occupied by old material, which is just stacked up, baggage. And after a while, as you get older, you realize this is weighing you down. And it's about time to get rid of it. And if I don't start to get rid of it now, it will be too late. So, the mantra, now penetrating into this level of consciousness, is dealing with these waves of energy and bringing healing and integrating. And occasionally you will hit a pocket of anger or of sadness. Sadness of something that you've lost, sadness of something you didn't do, anger at something that somebody did to you, or anger, or whatever. So either anger or sadness and other related feelings can be released. And sometimes all of this is resolved just in the unconscious. You don't have to have what do you call those things? A whole scan. What do you call those things? MRI scan to see every cell of your body and every cell of your psyche. Much of it is just done in the silence. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who planted a seed in the ground. He went to bed at night, he got up in the morning, and all the time the seed was growing. How, he did not know. So a lot of this growth and healing is done, how, we do not know, in the unconscious. Otherwise we'd be spending 23 hours a day in therapy or analysis. So you have to get on with life. And getting on with life is part of the therapy. But sometimes something bubbles up into consciousness and you say to yourself, I wonder why I'm thinking about this person or that situation or that time when I was at school or that relationship I had, and this was a long time ago. And I dealt with that. Yeah, it worried me, upset me at the time, but or a loss that you had, a grief that you felt. I think I told some of you that once I was, actually, I don't think I've told it, but Giovanni and I were driving in London and we passed my cemetery where my mother is buried. And I said, do you remember? And I said, let's go in and say a prayer. And when we found the grave, we went up to the grave, and suddenly, out of nowhere, I mean, this was 10 years after she died, this power, this like volcano of grief erupted. And for, I don't know, a few moments, I just was weeping, and was back at that moment when we were burying her, when she was being put into the earth. So I thought, where did that come from after 10 years, So sometimes things do bubble up into the surface and you have to deal with them, and they will teach you something, or maybe you have to talk about them with somebody. But most of the time, you don't have to see this as it is a therapy session in the sense of a healing work, but it's not analytical, therapy, having to force yourself to remember every detail of your life. So there is a real work going on here as well. At this level of your consciousness, you will find that your mind is becoming a little clearer and a little calmer, and your memory is improving, and you're able to deal with stress better, and all the benefits that people find in mindfulness, or useful benefits for day-to-day living. But this, so that continues. And at this level of consciousness, you also begin to feel a deeper peace, a deeper harmony. And you feel that something is happening that's making you more whole. Again, difficult to make precise, but it's a feeling of general harmony and integration. Now, it makes a big difference whether you actually meditate or whether you think about meditation. Or you're reading books about meditation, or you're telling people you meditate, but you don't. And it makes a big difference also whether you meditate once a week, or twice a week, or once a day, or twice a day. That's just natural, isn't it?
So it's practice.
Well,
From point A to B, or is the practice, the meditation practice, or is the grace?
Well,
How do you go from point A to point B?
well, you go. It's practice and grace. Yeah, God doesn't do all, we're not puppets. Yeah, good. Yeah, no, not puppets. Yeah, we're not passive. If we have to put something out.
You need to be diligent, right? That's the main thing.
Well, you don't have to be perfect, yes, but you need to do it. Yeah. Okay, and then grace will come in. So we put in 5 cents, and God puts in $50. But we have to put in it's what makes us receptive. I mean, that's a better way of putting it. What makes us realize what is already there. Finding the treasure that's buried in the field. It's already there. So it's not a transaction, but we have to do some digging, otherwise we're not there. So now we're continuing to meditate. And then we come to this level, which Giovanni read about, was it last night, from the Cloud of Unknowing?
Yeah.
So, and the Cloud of Unknowing is this little book in the 14th century about Christian meditation, in which he says, do this work, the work of meditation, describes the mantra. And then he says, at a certain point, it's what he described, what he read yesterday, you will come to what he calls a naked awareness of yourself. So it's just, you just come up against a wall, and you can't. What is the wall? The wall is self-consciousness, and it's okay, and it's the shadow of the self-consciousness of our ego consciousness, of our sense of separateness. We all feel this at times. You're able to do something generous, you're able to give, but then you reach your limit, and something says, you know, I am doing this, or I am doing this, and am I getting what? So the self-consciousness comes in and begins to demand something else. So this is not sin, this is just our natural ego consciousness. But we're meeting it at its source. We're not meeting it in all the confusion of our daily life and conflicts. We're not even meeting it here in our personal history. But we're meeting it where it begins. This naked awareness of ourself. So what do you do? So, by this time you have learnt that saying the mantra is your way. So you just have to sit here at times, facing the wall of your ego, no sense of transcendence, no sense of the divine presence, no sense of sweetness and light, none of the things you were reading about you're feeling. And all you're feeling is, I'm just sitting here on my cushion, in my chair, and sitting here for 20 minutes or half an hour and just saying this word, and it's just, you know, same old thing. Nothing's happening. Not getting anything out of it. But by the time you've reached this point, you have learned a lot. I was talking this morning about the cycle from enthusiasm to achadia, and then to apatheia and to agape. So by the time you've reached this point, you've learnt just to stay there. Also, what has happened in the process is that the way you say your mantra has changed. Because up here, you're saying it in a rather crude way, because you're being constantly interrupted every 1 second by your thoughts. So you're saying the mantra, and people will sometimes say, I find it so difficult to say the mantra, I start saying it very loudly in my head, because, to drown out the noise of your thoughts. So at first you're saying it with this feeling of hard work and constant resistance. And then you begin to hear, hopefully, what people are saying to you, which is, you don't have to try so hard. You can be a little easier on yourself and say the mantra a little more lightly, with more of a light touch. And you'll get further if you do that. So gradually, one day, you hear that. You've probably heard it 1,000,000 times, but somebody says it and you begin to understand it. At this level, then, it's more as if you're sounding the mantra, because now it's taking root in your consciousness and in the prayer of the heart experience. So it's more as if you're sounding it with less effort, and it's all, maybe you could say it's like starting a pendulum to swing when you sit down to meditate. So there's still some effort, of course, and decision on your part to say it, but now it's more and more part of you. Be like a violinist who picks up the violin and just is at one with the instrument. At this level now, you begin to listen to the mantra as you say it. So the one thing the mantra is not is mechanical. It's repetition, but it's not the repetition of a machine, it's the repetition of love. What is love? Just coming back over and over again to what you love and discovering it again for the first time and encountering it. And at each repetition of the mantra, which you say faithfully and lovingly, you go deeper. you go deeper, because the mantra is taking you deeper into the mystery of your own being and showing you what a treasure there is buried in the field of your heart, your life. So here, okay, you reach the ego, not much fun, sitting there facing your ego. And Giovanni used to say that the ego we build up the ego with many bricks. And many things have happened to us in life that hurt us, and so we build up a resistance to them. We put another brick in, a wall of separation between. The ego shouldn't be a wall, the ego should be a means of communication. But very easily, because the ego is wounded and hurt, and separation always hurts, then the ego becomes a wall. We think it's a wall protecting us from the outside world, which is dangerous and hurtful, but in fact, of course, it becomes a prison as well. So, little by little, one day, you feel a brick falls out of this wall. And it can come in any sort of way. It can come through a meeting in which you see, you respond, you see grace, you see love, you see there's something on the other side. It's only one little brick that's fallen out, so you don't see the whole picture, but at least you know there's something on the other side. You don't know how long it's going to take to dismantle this wall. But you're much more prepared now to be faithful to what you've started. And then maybe another day you find yourself able to do something that you were terrified of doing before. You never thought you would be able to say this or to do this or to remain faithful to something. And now you find you can do it, and actually it's not so difficult. Actually, it's the right thing to do. So little fears fall away, little avenues of grace open up, and generally you become a more open person. More open to what? More open to the depth of yourself, more open to the reality of other people, more open to the grace of God shaping your life, if you want to accept that. You have to accept grace. So, this is an area of the psyche or of the self where at first it seems very dry and very blocked, but you find yourself in a blind alley, but in fact then you begin to realize you are entering a new space. And then in God's own time, which is out of time, this opens up. And you move from the sorrow of existence, as the cloud of unknowing calls it, the ego, the separation, the feeling of being blocked. You move from that and you get a real breath of the joy of the Spirit, the joy of being, rather than the sorrow of existence. And then you are now in the realm of the Spirit, your own spirit, boundless, infinite, expansive. No limit to this expansion, which can also be a bit frightening. And here we find, or we recognize, our guide. Jesus was present to us, is present to us up here in our noisy, distracted minds. Jesus is present to us here in this deeper work of healing and integration that takes place, and Jesus is here as we pick up the cross of our ego every day and carry it. Just as Jesus was present to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him, but they were with him, and funnily enough, they were talking to him about him.
Yes.
And then he started talking to them about himself through the scriptures. And they felt their hearts burning, or they said that later. And then, when it was time for him to go and leave them, they asked him to stay. They didn't know who he was, but at the moment when he broke the bread, they recognized him. And what happened then?
He disappeared.
He disappeared from their sight. And what did they feel at that moment? What did they feel? Orphaned.
They went back to your friends.
Yeah, what did they feel? What? Well, they said they felt this heat in their hearts when they were talking to him, yes. But what did they feel immediately after the...
Their hearts were burning.
Their hearts were burning as they were walking along the road. But what did they feel when he disappeared from their sight?
That they had
That
not
he had to
recognized
go.
him, they were very sorry about that they didn't recognize him before.
Where did you read that?
I have been very, I have read that many times to Emmaus when they are walking.
Yes, it doesn't say that.
Huh?
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that.
No, but I just imagine.
Ah. So are you rewriting the gospel? So okay, we know that they go back to Jerusalem. But they go back totally, they were running away from Jerusalem because they were frightened. So now they go back to Jerusalem to spread the good news. Okay, so now they go back, they're full of joy, full of energy, and they have a meaning in their life. They've got something to do, a good work to do, and then they go off and get martyred. Probably. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they settle down and have 6 children. I don't know. But the important thing is that they are energized. So where has Jesus gone?
Inside them?
Yes, they've interiorized him. At this level, at the beginning, when they were talking about him, they were remembering him. They had a mental relationship with him, imaginative relationship with him. Then, at this level, their hearts burned, but they didn't know why. But they were blocked. They still didn't recognize him. And then, in the breaking of the bread, as he gave himself to them, their eyes were opened and they realized. And then he didn't need. They knew him now in another level of themselves, in another dimension. So in the spiritual dimension. So it is here that we meet and recognize Jesus progressively in our spirit. Simone Weil said, he comes to us hidden, and salvation consists in our recognizing him. So recognizing, not remembering, not feeling, but recognizing him. So here, then, as this dimension opens up, and this is where we begin to understand what the Spirit means and what the mystery of the spiritual dimension of life and of ourselves. We go with Jesus, in Jesus, and through Jesus, in the Spirit to the Father, which is an infinite expansion. But now we have we have a journey, we have a direction, and we know how. Now, what has happened up here? We're still pretty distracted much of the time, but less. We've still got a lot of stuff to sort through of our past and our feelings and our habits, and we still have an ego. But at each of these levels, integration is taking place. And the energy and the life, the consciousness that is opened up here through the indwelling Christ, through the Spirit within, is of course also moving up and spreading through the whole of this.
How?
I don't know.
No,
It's a mystery.
How it moves that energy up to a different levels of.
Well,
So it can goes back to its beginning, to where it began.
no, this is the source. I think what we feel is it's been here all the time. It's everywhere all the time. But because this is a kind of a watershed experience. It may take years to unfold, but it's a watershed experience. And what this does is make us aware of the presence of this, if you like, this is the goal, this is the meaning, this is the purpose, this is the beginning and the end of our existence. But this is affecting, influencing everything because it is all-pervasive. Now, there may be certain times, experiences, even physical experiences, that sort of make you aware of it or trigger your awareness. But as a whole, all of these dimensions of consciousness, that means your whole self, are being harmonized, being integrated. And you become more real, more incarnate. And you can handle the challenges of daily life. You can love yourself as you go through these, as you go through your own process of healing. And your ego becomes a little less unpleasant. Your ego, of course, will sometimes flare up and you become a monster, but more of the time, the ego becomes a way of communicating, a way of communicating or transmitting what is happening here. The death of the ego, or the dying of the ego, even when it's painful, releases this joy of the self.